welcome to a special Pride episode of the CHSG History Podcast.
Today we are taking a deep dive into the Lavender scare, Greek culture and Stonewall.
Our first segment today, though, is on lesbians and the AIDS crisis.
Hello and welcome back to a new segment of our Pride episode. In this segment we are going to discuss how women, more specifically lesbians, provided care and assistance in the AIDS crisis.
Pause. I learnt what HIV/AIDS was in biology, but what does it even mean?
AIDS is, according to the dictionary, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. It's a chronic condition caused by the HIV virus.
I mean, that sounds interesting, but how was it a crisis though? Was it like the Black Plague?
Not quite. It was recognised as a crisis because of its rapid and widespread impact on people, leaving individuals with little hope and being basically a death sentence.
Gosh, that's horrible. But what does this have to do with Pride Month?
HIV is a sexually transmitted disease, and in the early stages of the crisis, governments ignored outcries from the heavily affected gay community.
Thousands of gay men were dying of AIDS, and their governments ignored them.
But why would they do that?
Homophobia. Even though homosexuality was legal in a lot of Western countries by the start of the outbreak, the media was still very biased when it came to mentioning or depicting homosexuality.
So, because a lot of people were homophobic, the crisis wasn't reported on?
Exactly. Homosexual men were banned from giving blood, as well as ignored by nurses and doctors, and essentially left to die.
Before appropriate research was conducted, AIDS was known as GERD, gay-related immune disorder, because all anyone knew about it was that it primarily affected gay men.
This meant that a lot of straight healthcare professionals refused to conduct research because they assumed it would never affect them.
Awful. But hang on, where do lesbians come in if AIDS primarily affected gay men?
Tensions between gay men and lesbians were high in the early stages of the gay rights movement.
Unfortunately, many queer spaces were riddled with misogyny, which excluded lesbians, as lesbians were seen as having it easier in some queer spaces.
But that's completely unfair. Queer women are just as deserving as queer men.
Exactly, but misogyny was so rampant from everyone, and unfortunately that includes gay men.
Feminists described sexism as absolutely standard in the 70s and 80s.
This caused lesbians to separate themselves from gay men for fear of misogynistic abuse.
So, if the lesbians were treated so poorly before the crisis, what eased the tensions and got them to help?
Because the abuse that gay men were suffering at the hands of the system was nothing short of disgusting.
Lesbians knew how it felt to face injustice and didn't want to stand by and let that injustice happen to another undeserving group of people.
So, what did they do to help?
It varied. There were lots of different ways that they could help. Some were caretakers.
Some organised blood drives and denied by formal medical institutions.
And some provided hospice care.
That's so sweet.
Many of these gay men spent the rest of their lives alone because it wasn't implausible that their lovers had died.
Or that their families had disowned them.
So these women would often be the last people that these men would ever see.
That's heartbreaking. Wait, but weren't there any organisations that, assisted gay men?
Well, there weren't many professional organisations, as no one really wanted to be seen assisting with the crisis.
However, a group of lesbians called the San Diego Blood Sisters organised blood drives because
Gay men were banned from donating blood?
Exactly!
But why were these blood drives a necessity?
Well, HIV targets the immune system, leaving you vulnerable to...
You've already told me.
Alright.
Well, many patients were anemic. Basically, there wasn't enough iron in their blood. So they needed transfusions, but were banned from having them.
So the San Diego Blood Sisters offered this life-saving care and prolonged the lives of hundreds of patients.
So why is this relevant today?
The help lesbians offered brought forth more solidarity within the queer community.
Lesbians and bisexual women became more respected in queer spaces, and the help that queer women offered would reduce the misogyny that queer women would face in LGBTQ+ spaces in the future.
And that's why we still tell the stories of these women today. They were key for the progression of the rights of the queer women.
Robin, how would you feel about
I'd like to summarise.
Literally what I just said.
Oh.
Go on then.
Oh, right. Yes, the AIDS crisis was an epidemic that took place in the 1980s.
And it primarily affected
Gay men.
Which led to issues because of...
Homophobia in the media. Gay men who needed blood transfusions were refused or neglected because of their orientations.
And who stepped up to help?
Lesbians.
And why is this significant?
Misogyny was common in the queer community, but lesbians still stepped up to offer blood transfusions, hospice care, and just general support for gay men.
Which is significant because...
It improved the rights of queer women and reduced misogyny in the queer community after the crisis.
Look at us go!
Literally, we could teach a class on teaching.
Thank you so much for listening to this section of our Pride special.
We hope you learned something about the help that women offered that often goes overlooked.
Happy Pride!
Bye.
Amazing.
I didn't know half of that stuff.
Our next section is on
Stonewall. I hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome to the special edition episode on Pride Month.
How did Pride Month come into existence?
And what happened to the people involved in the Stonewall riots?
All will be covered in this extra special episode as we dig deep into its origins and interesting facts.
So, what is Pride Month?
Pride Month is a celebration of inclusivity, highlighting the fact that all people should have equal rights even if they're part of the LGBTQ community.
Pride Month began in 1970, a year after the Stonewall riots took place.
What were the Stonewall riots?
The Stonewall riots were a demonstration act fighting for the rights of people within the LGBTQ community.
It was sparked by the actions regarding a police raid on the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay bar in New York City. The raid took place on June 28, 1969.
The Stonewall Inn was a secret pub for those part of the LGBTQ community. It was the only place in New York where people could be proud of being themselves around others and not feel ashamed of their LGBTQ title.
However, the police raided the inn at 1 a.m, arresting those who wore clothes from the opposing gender or a mix of each gender as well.
This was the last straw. Those within the LGBTQ community would not tolerate this anymore. This led to the protest of the Stonewall riots. Over hundreds of people were in attendance as they came together to fight for the equality of LGBTQ members.
Did you know that people who are gay or lesbian weren't allowed to be legally married?
As well as this, they weren't allowed to adopt any children or do any service in the military.
It must have been hard for the LGBTQ members at the time.
What happened to the people involved in the Stonewall riots and what did they achieve by doing so?
Although there were lots of series of arrests, injuries and ongoing protests, the people involved were able to boost the visibility and activism of the gay rights movement.
As well as this, new activism groups were formed, aiming to help the LGBTQ plus community have rights just as fair as anyone else's.
Some of these LGBTQ organisations included the Gay Liberation Front, GLF, and the Gay Activist Alliance, GAA, all of which were hoping to gain equal rights for everyone, specifically the LGBTQ members.
Do you know what the acronym LGBTQ plus stands for?
Yes, it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer.
I didn't know that.
Me either. Another thing I didn't know is why was it so important for people within the LGBTQ community to fight for their rights?
This was because they faced a widespread of discrimination which impacted their physical, mental and emotional well-being.
Something had to be done about this.
The equality of LGBTQ members was achieved by the activism method of the Stonewall riots, a well-known event which played a key part in gaining justice for the LGBTQ community.
Why is Pride Month such an important part of history?
You can owe it all to Marsha P. Johnson.
Marsha P. Johnson, who's that?
Marsha P. Johnson was an important figure in Pride history. She was a transgender woman who fought for the rights of the LGBTQ people. After graduating high school, Marsha moved to New York City with just $15 and a bag of clothes. She wore bright women's clothes, highlighting the fact of her bold personality.
What does the P stand for in Marsha P. Johnson?
P. Johnson. The P stood for Pay It No Mind. To her, this was a life motto and a response to questions about her gender.
And that's the end of our Facts on Pride Month. Thank you all for listening to our special edition episode.
We hope you enjoyed it and we hope you stay tuned for next time.
Enjoy your Pride.
Wow, that was so interesting.
I had no clue that happened.
Well, our next section is even better. It is going to be on the Lavender Scare.
Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the section of our Pride episode. We are going to be discussing a slightly more niche event in LGBTQ history, the Lavender Scare. Let's establish a setting. Cold War America. Now the Lavender Scare was...
Right, wait, hang on. Why would anyone be scared of flowers?
No, that's not what it means. Lavender Scare refers to the term Lavender Lads, where people would gossip about gay politicians, Hollywood stars and their sexualities. It also referred to where queer people wore lavender so others would know that they were queer.
Oh, right. What was the Lavender Scare then?
The Lavender Scare is a very interesting part of not only queer history but also political history. It's a great case study to tell us how politics and events going on in politics can affect the life of an average person.
So it was political?
Yeah, it was extremely political.
It was built on politics and fifths in the Cold War.
Well, yeah, people were afraid of the communism after World War II because of the anti-communist stuff.
Propaganda.
Yeah, But what does that have to do with gay people?
Senator Joseph McCarthy linked homosexuality and communism by convincing the American people that both were morally weak or psychologically disturbed.
People were really stressed about internal security, so the State Department began campaigns to rid the department of communists and queer people.
The Lavender Scare began in 1947. It forced gay men and lesbians out of jobs in politics and government sectors.
But why does it matter? Like, what was the impact?
Well, many queer people in government jobs were forced out of the closet. Being gay was illegal and heavily frowned upon in the 50s. Being outed in such a public way could have devastating consequences.
Why were they in the closet in the first place?
This was the USA. Opinions on gay men and lesbians weren't very high, even before all the propaganda that described queer people as mentally deranged or immoral was published. Attitudes towards queer people still aren't very well taken now, even in the great year of 2025.
This led people with political power to prey on the unwarranted fear that the public held for anything different, and thus the Lavender Scare was born.
Right, so what actually happened? Like, how many people were affected?
Well, between 1947 and 1950, over 1,700 applicants to federal jobs were denied positions to the due allegation of homosexuality.
Plus, around 4,000 to 5,000 men in total that had been in consideration for these jobs were turned away.
But that's crazy. It's just turning people away from jobs that needed doing. They must have been wild levels of homophobics to do that.
Well, Roy Cohn himself, the main lawyer who worked on the case, was gay.
I'm sorry, what?
He was gay himself.
Right, yeah, sure, cool. But if it was gay, what was he doing oppressing all the gay people?
Denial?
Social expectations.
Cowardice.
Right, okay, that's a bit strong. Let's not forget that it wasn't exactly like they could be themselves. These people weren't able to have fun at Pride or make podcast episodes. They were stuck not being able to express their true identity.
But then again, that doesn't change the fact that he was a coward. He went against his own community to become an oppressor. And for what? Some point with a bunch of other closeted queer people. He used the oppression he hid from for his own political gain.
But Cohen was still victim of societal pressures, wasn't he?
I mean, to an extent, but he had friends in high places.
I suppose that's true, but it didn't help in the end, did it?
It didn't. Roy Cohn ended up dying of AIDS in 1986, and the blanket on the AIDS memorial reads bully, victim, coward.
Well, based on this, it seems like it sums up his character.
He sounded like a hypocrite.
I think he was a hypocrite.
That's up to debate. He was scared too.
Well, while you can form your own opinions on Cohn, I think we can all agree that the Lavender Scare was one of the darkest periods in queer history.
Agreed. It helps to show us what can happen when people in power turn against their own communities.
That actually taught me quite a lot.
Would you like to sum up, Bia?
Yeah, demonstrate what you learned.
Okay, so the Lavender Scare was a morally fueled panic about gay men and lesbian in the US government in the 40s to the 60s.
Which led to
the mass dismissal of queer people from government jobs.
And link to?
It is linked to the anti-communist campaign, which is known as the McCarthyism, and the Second Red Scare.
We are such good teachers.
real.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
It's been lovely to talk about the Lavender Scare and how it affected people.
We hope talking about this important part of queer history will raise awareness on oppression.
And happy Pride Month to all our listeners out there.
That was interesting.
Well, this is now our last segment. I know, sad, right? But this is going to be a good one. It's on Greek culture.
Hello, welcome to this extra special slot in the podcast. Today we are talking about
The LGBTQIA plus community in, a drumroll please, okay, ancient Greece.
In case you couldn't tell, Ace is very passionate about this, so please excuse his excitement. Ace is the hyper one of the group after all.
Well, duh. Also, thank you for using my pronouns and preferred name.
Oh yeah, no problem. Even though I've been using your preferred name since the start.
I'm sorry, just say that again, please?
Anyways, let's continue with the podcast.
Okay, let's do it. What are we talking about again?
What have we been talking about this entire time?
History? Well, no, really.
Greek mythology. We have been talking about Greek mythology for the past 2 months.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's okay, Mel.
Yay! Right. First, we'll be talking about what the ancient Greeks thought about the LGBTQIA plus community.
Ooh, coolio. So, what do they think?
Well, homosexuality was a common and accepted part of society, and they considered it to be a normal and healthy part of life.
Wait, so they were completely fine with it?
Yep, 100%. In fact, this is why if I had to live in a different time period, I would definitely choose ancient Greece.
Agreed. Hey, quick question.
Shoot.
Roughly how many people were part of the community?
Ellie, how are you expecting us to know that?
I thought you would have done research, or there would have been an estimate or something.
Oh my god, we tried, okay? We tried, but we are talking about ancient Greece here. Okay, do you not hear the ancient?
It was just a question. And since you don't know how many, do you at least know some well-known people who were?
Absolutely. Remember back in episode 3 when we talked about how Apollo was bisexual and gave a list of people who were also a part of the community?
Oh yeah, there was Zeus, Achilles, and...
Hold on. Mel should say the rest. Since she's not told as many facts as me, the best Greek mythology researcher here. Obviously.
I do most of the research.
Not to sound like a teacher, but Ace, if you're so smart, why don't you tell the audience the names of the people then?
Oh, gladly. There was Narcissus and Chrysippus of Pisa. Oh, and an extra one that we didn't mention last time is Ganymede. How'd I do?
Oh, sheets of paper. That is, good?
So, can I talk now?
Oh, yeah,
yes,
sorry.
Great. So let's talk about the extra one Ace just mentioned. Ganymede?
Okay, so, what was the story?
Well, he was a prince of Troy who was the son of Tros.
And he was known for his exceptional beauty, which Zeus was captivated by.
So, he kidnapped him.
And he brought him to Mount Olympus, where Zeus made him his cupbearer and the official server of nectar and ambrosia.
So now, can we go into more detail about how Zeus kidnapped Ganymede?
Yeah, of course, we can go into the story of G-Man.
Okay. Ace, don't call him that again. That sounds bad.
Anyways, so Ganymede was abducted by Zeus because he liked him and he was handsome.
Why did he do that?
Did you not hear what I just said?
I'm just testing you.
I'm sorry, but what kind of kid is just going to be fine with being kidnapped?
Well, he obviously didn't choose to be kidnapped now, did he? He didn't, right?
Right, duh. So basically, Zeus transformed himself into an eagle, swooped down and took him. And Mel, I don't think it's possible to willingly be kidnapped because that would just be you going with them.
And then Zeus made him the cupbearer.
And the official server of nectar and ambrosia. Such a romantic tale.
Well, anyways, that's all we have time for today.
And remember, be proud of who you are and what you know.
Very motivational, Mal. Stay tuned when we'll talk about Odysseus' Odyssey in episode 6 or 7.
Well, actually, it's kind of episode 8. We got moved down an episode because there wasn't enough space.
Anyways, we hope you enjoyed this slot and make sure to tune in next time before those two get at it again. Bye!
Say that again.
What?
That was amazing, but as you know, it was our last segment.
Do tune in next time and don't forget to subscribe.
Remember to like this video as well.
Bye!